He stood just beyond the velvet rope, a faded cap in his hand, his shoes too worn for the polished marble beneath him. "This is a private event, sir," said the young coordinator, not unkind, but firm. The old man nodded, stepped back without protest, and simply watched as they began the tribute. Rows of uniforms, medals, speeches, all honoring heroes of a mission whose name he quietly mouthed under his breath. But no one noticed, until the keynote speaker paused mid-sentence. His eyes locked on the man at the back. "Wait, why is he out there?" he asked, voice breaking. That's when everything changed. Raymond Ellis hadn't worn his full uniform in over 2 decades. The jacket didn't quite fit anymore, its buttons pulling slightly across his chest. But he wore it anyway, creased, clean, and careful. On his head sat the same cap he'd worn through dust storms in Kandahar, now faded to a soft gray and stitched once at the rim where it had torn against a steel door in '04. He never fixed it properly. Said it reminded him of the day it tore. He arrived alone, on foot, parking his truck 3 blocks away because he didn't want to be in the way. No one noticed him come in. No one offered to check his name. He didn't ask for a seat. Instead, he stood near the back, hands clasped loosely in front of him like he was still in formation, eyes locked on the podium where the ceremony was about to begin. The ballroom was immaculate, gleaming brass, white tablecloths, soldiers in dress blues and service medals polished to a mirror shine. A large screen behind the stage displayed the words, "Operation Stone Ridge, honoring 20 years of sacrifice." Ellis stared at the phrase. Not with pride. With silence. He didn't come for applause. He came to listen. And when the young coordinator approached him, clipboard in hand and a strained smile, he didn't resist. "No, sir, this section's reserved. Family and veterans on the list only." Raymond nodded, took 2 steps back, and stood behind the velvet rope. He didn't even flinch. Raymond wasn't looking for recognition. He had no one left to impress. No family in the audience. No surviving friends from his unit. Most of them had passed, some in battle, others quietly in the years after. What he wanted, more than anything, was to hear the names. The roll call. That sacred reading of the fallen. Because he remembered all of them. He carried a folded paper in his pocket, softened and refolded so many times the creases had faded into threads. On it, 17 names. His men. The ones from Ridge 42. The ones who hadn't made it out when the sky turned orange and the radios went dead. The ones whose boots he had gathered after the smoke cleared. He had memorized the weight of each name. Operation Stone Ridge was where it happened. The official record said 47 lives lost, 2 helicopters downed, a successful objective, and unclear command coordination during the retreat. But the real story, the part that never made the reports, was buried in Raymond's memory. Because on that mountain, amid shrapnel and sand, one man made a choice that saved a dozen others. And no one ever knew it was him. So now, 2 decades later, when he read that there would be a commemoration, he figured it was time to visit. Not for medals. Not for speeches. But because they were finally saying the names out loud. That would be enough. At least, that's what he thought. The moment he stepped into the building, the air changed. Not for him, he was used to being ignored, but around him, people moved in brisk patterns. Staff directed guests to their seats, photographers prepared for the general's arrival, and a pair of cadets rehearsed the flag-folding ceremony near the back hallway. No one looked at Raymond. And when they did, they looked away quickly. Maybe it was the limp, or the outdated uniform, or the way he stood too still, like a man rehearsing how not to be noticed. He didn't mind. Not really. He'd grown used to this, to being the forgotten part of the story. But then he heard it. One of the coordinators, holding a clipboard and speaking to a junior officer in a sharp whisper. There's an older gentleman at the back, no credentials, no RSVP. Probably wandered in from the street. Keep him behind the rope. The words didn't sting. Not exactly. But something inside Raymond flickered. The same quiet weight he'd felt years ago when they airlifted the survivors and left 17 flags folded with no answers attached. He had kept their names all this time. Yet to them, he was nobody. The rope was red, velvet, ceremonial. Meant to keep guests in their place. So he obeyed. When the lights dimmed and the ceremony began, Raymond stood just beyond the barrier, cap in hand, watching the tribute begin, his hands gently trembling. The speaker's voice boomed through the chamber, a well-rehearsed cadence of reverence. "We gather to honor the heroes of Operation Stone Ridge, whose courage carved history from chaos." Each name echoed like thunder, drawing quiet nods and wet eyes from the audience. Slides played, photos of sand-swept bases, dust-caked boots, and group shots taken in fading sunlight before helicopters rose into flame-colored skies. Raymond's jaw tensed. On the screen, one image caught his breath. A photo of a man kneeling beside a wounded soldier, shielding him with his own body as debris exploded behind them. The caption read, "Unknown Sergeant, Ridge 42 Perimeter." Unknown. He remembered that moment. The boy in the dirt was Jenkins. 19. Shrapnel in his leg. Screaming for his mother. Raymond had thrown himself between him and the blast, arms spread, praying to be fast enough. The photo had been taken by a scout in the trees. No one had ever asked who that man was. Until now, they still didn't know. On stage, the next speaker approached the podium. Younger, decorated. A captain now, once a private. His eyes scanned the crowd. Then paused. Locked. His mouth hung open slightly. He'd seen him. His hand rose, pointing. Wait. Why is he out there? The silence that followed was louder than anything the ceremony had planned. The crowd turned, slowly, collectively. Heads pivoted toward the back of the hall where Raymond stood, still, caught between confusion and muscle memory. The keynote speaker stepped down from the podium without a word. Microphones buzzed. The cameraman followed on instinct. No script prepared them for this. "Sergeant Ellis," the young captain said, moving closer. "Is that you?" Raymond hesitated. His voice hadn't been called in public in years. He nodded once. Slowly. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Several in uniform rose to their feet instinctively, not out of applause, but out of reflex. Out of training. The general, an older man with silver hair and 4 stars on his collar, stood at attention beside the stage. His hand moved to his brow, then paused. "I thought you were gone," he whispered. Raymond simply said, "I was never far. Just wasn't asked." A chair was pulled out at the front. The red rope unhooked. A path opened. And for the first time in over 20 years, Sergeant Raymond Ellis walked into the light. Not as a stranger, not as a name missing from a list, but as the reason they were all standing there. The remaining speeches were forgotten. No one cared for the itinerary. The attention now centered on the weathered man whose presence had just rewritten the room's history. Raymond didn't take the front row. He sat off to the side, hands folded, posture still disciplined but quieter now, as if he'd been holding something heavy for far too long and had finally been allowed to set it down. The general approached and knelt, breaking every line of ceremony. His voice cracked. "You carried them all out. Every last one. I read the reports, I saw the satellite feed. No one believed it could be done. But you did it." Raymond didn't respond right away. Then, "They weren't just soldiers. They were my boys. I gave my word I'd bring them home." Silence held the room like a breath. One by one, men and women in uniform began rising, saluting without command, tears shining without shame. And somewhere in the audience, someone whispered the words that would echo far beyond that day. "How did we forget him?" But they wouldn't forget again. After the ceremony, the crowd filtered out slowly, still whispering about the man who had changed everything without ever asking for recognition. But Raymond didn't linger. He left quietly, slipping past clusters of stunned officers and young soldiers who weren't sure whether to thank him or apologize. No one stopped him. He didn't go home. Instead, he found the old bench near the war memorial, chipped stone, uneven paint, the kind no one ever fixed because no one ever asked them to. He sat there for a long time, hands folded in his lap, cap resting beside him. The silence crept in, not peaceful, but heavy. Recognition didn't bring comfort. If anything, it made the weight of the past heavier. He hadn't come for applause, and now that he had it, he didn't know what to do with it. The faces came back. Jenkins, Halvorsen, Torres. Some smiling, some bleeding, some just gone. He thought the ceremony would help him close the chapter. Instead, it reopened every page. Earlier, someone had pressed a small card into his hand. A contact from the Department of Veterans Affairs. "We'd love to get your story for the archive," the man had said. But Raymond didn't need an archive. He needed sleep. He needed peace. A sudden gust lifted his cap off the bench. He chased it, limping awkwardly, and caught it just before it hit the ground. As he straightened up, he saw a teenage boy staring at him, wide-eyed, uncertain. The kid had been at the ceremony. "Were you really there?" the boy asked softly. Raymond nodded, unsure what to say. The boy's reply was simple. "My dad said you saved his father." Raymond blinked. He hadn't expected that. He hadn't realized the echoes still reached this far. The following week, a letter arrived. No return address. Just a folded sheet of cream-colored paper and a message in tight, careful handwriting. "We owe you more than we ever said. Please come. One more time." It was signed by Captain Daniel Reyes, the keynote speaker from the ceremony. Raymond hesitated. He hadn't returned to the base in 20 years. Not since Ridge 42. Not since the medics pulled him out of the field and told him he'd never serve again. But something in that note pulled at him, not duty, not guilt, but the faintest thread of belonging. 2 days later, he found himself standing at the gates of Fort Glenmore, his name now in the logbook, his arrival expected. Inside, things had changed. The buildings were newer, the soldiers younger, the uniforms tighter. But the salutes he received felt genuine, tentative at first, then respectful. Word had spread. They led him to a hangar, lights dimmed, chairs lined in formation. In the center stood a podium, and beside it, a glass display case covered in cloth. Captain Reyes stepped forward, this time without a microphone, no cameras in sight. "We didn't get it right last time," he said. "But today, we fixed that." He lifted the cloth. Inside was a framed photo, Raymond shielding Jenkins on that mountain. Below it, Sergeant Raymond Ellis, Ridge 42. He didn't leave anyone behind. The room stood. Every soldier, every officer. In silent tribute. And for the first time, Raymond's hands trembled, not from age, but from release. After the unveiling, Raymond remained seated while others approached him, not to shake his hand, not to take photos, but to speak. One by one, they shared fragments of stories he hadn't realized were still alive. "My uncle said you pulled him out when he couldn't walk. My mother wrote about you in her letters. She called you the quiet shadow. I wear this patch because my dad said you earned it more than he ever did." Each voice chipped away at the invisible wall Raymond had built over the years. Each face reminded him that what he thought had been forgotten had, in fact, been passed down. Spoken in family kitchens, whispered at gravesides, written into the hearts of those who never saw him but knew who he was. Captain Reyes offered him a folded paper. A citation, belated but official. For exceptional bravery beyond the call of duty. It didn't matter that it came decades late. Raymond only looked at the date, then back up at the young man. "Better late than never," he murmured. Reyes nodded. "Sir, we named the training ground after Ridge 42. But we're renaming the mess hall this week. It's going to be called Ellis Hall." Raymond's breath caught. He hadn't cried in years. He thought he'd forgotten how. But in that moment, as a young recruit saluted him with trembling fingers, he felt it, everything that had been locked away, the pain, the pride, the burden, finally seen. When Raymond left Fort Glenmore that evening, the sky was turning gold. A soft wind carried the scent of warm dust and pine, strangely familiar, like the calm before a mission. He walked slower now. But he stood straighter. At the gate, a guard leaned out of the booth. "Thank you, Sergeant," he said. "For everything." Raymond offered a small nod. "Just did my part." The ride home was quiet. When he reached the town's edge, he pulled over by the small park with the worn bench. He sat for a while, watching children play, their laughter echoing across the grass. In his hand was the citation, still folded. He didn't open it again. He didn't need to. A young woman passed by pushing a stroller. She paused, eyes flicking to his cap. "Were you in the military?" she asked kindly. Raymond hesitated, then smiled softly. "Yes, ma'am. A long time ago." She nodded. "Thank you." It was such a small phrase, but it landed like a final salute. And in that quiet, after everything, Raymond felt something unexpected. Peace. News spread slowly at first. A local paper ran a small story, "Ceremony honors forgotten hero." The photo was grainy, but the caption was clear. Within days, national veterans groups shared it. The photo of Raymond beside the glass case traveled across timelines, profiles, memories. Old squad members, those still living, sent messages. One wrote, "You never stopped carrying us. Now it's our turn." The Department of Defense contacted him about archiving his full account. "You don't need to write it," the archivist said. "Just speak it. We'll listen." Schools invited him to speak. He declined most, but visited one, a 6th grade classroom. He didn't talk about war. He talked about promises and silence, and what it means to do the right thing even when no one's watching. By winter, the base had installed a plaque at Ellis Hall. Below his name, a simple quote he never remembered saying, but someone had. He showed up. That was enough. Spring came slowly that year. On the anniversary of the Ridge 42 operation, Raymond returned to Fort Glenmore, this time invited, this time honored. But he didn't walk into Ellis Hall right away. He stopped outside. Watched. Young soldiers were laughing near the doors. Inside, trays clattered, boots echoed. Life had moved forward. And that was okay. He sat on a bench under the flagpole and pulled out the old folded paper with the 17 names. He read each one. Out loud. Carefully. A new recruit approached. Nervous. Young. "Sir, were you part of Ridge 42? Raymond smiled. "I was the last one to leave." The boy looked down at the list. "They say you saved them." Raymond shook his head gently. "No. They saved me." The boy saluted, awkward and stiff. Raymond returned it, slow, steady, deliberate. And somewhere, far beyond the base and the years and the silence, a promise echoed again. He didn't want a ceremony, but he became the reason one existed.